computer. Hello and welcome to the Readers Writing Workshop. I rename this thing every minute and a half, but we have 7 incredible readers tonight who are writing. 7 incredible writers tonight who are reading from new works.
Oh, I'm Barbara.
It is a great opportunity to sort of visit their worlds and hear where they are.
Oh, that's Gail.
So I'm Julia Roberts. I run a class called Creative Mastery Class. We've been writing together for 5 weeks every morning.
Yeah. Her friend Gail.
And just a little bit of housekeeping.
Barbara's friend.
I will mute you if you talk, but I will also mute you during the speaker. You guys, I would love for you to please give our speaker feedback. If something is memorable, powerful, exciting, type it in the comments and just say, we all know our faults. We don't need to be told that I stumbled on a word because I'm already living that hell in my little head, right? But we don't know our power. And that's one of the things that you can really contribute here. And that is to help them hear and see what's so great about what they've just read. So a little housekeeping. I will mute everybody when someone's reading, unmute them so that there can be commentary, and then remute for the next reader. We're going to start with Lori Conroy Stevens. Oh, also, I would recommend that you go in your upper right-hand corner and go into speaker view so that whoever is speaking is larger.
Okay.
Especially once I've muted everybody but the main speaker. Otherwise, you'll flip around whenever anybody makes a little sound in their screen, right? You don't really. It's nicer to be in gallery mode when everybody's unmuted, but it's better to be in speaker mode when one speaker is speaking and everybody else is muted, because you'll have a nice big picture of that person reading. Okay. Any questions before we get started? Anybody have any concerns or questions before we get started?
Right now I'm just having
do people know how to use the chat?
Do people know how to use the chat?
Oh, that's a good question.
Do you guys know how to use the chat? It's in the lower, it's across the bottom of your screen. There's lots of little options. The one that looks like a word balloon says chat below it. And if you click on that, I don't see chat.
I know.
Where do you see chat? More? Ah, chat. Okay, got it. All right. Okay.
I don't see it either. Wait a minute then. Wait,
yeah, take your time.
I see share content. Mine's up at the top.
It's way over.
And it's under share content.
Do you know how to shut it off?
No.
I'm on
the screen.
I'm listening to a friend speak at something for half an hour, so don't interrupt me, please.
Mine is in the right corner.
Okay. Does everybody sort of get their way around? Know their way around a little bit? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to start with Lori O'Connor Steffens. And Lori is a former journalist and a business writer. She's a participant she was a participant in a local TV competition 8 years ago, and she came in 3rd. And this gave her the hot idea.
Speaking on this thing, it's something she's written. I don't know.
I met Lori at the Irma Bombeck Writers Workshop. So she's a comedy writer, although she is not reading from a comedy work tonight. Anyway, we've been working together, as I said, these last 5 weeks, every morning writing. And 5 weeks ago, Lori said she had ambitions and ideas, but she just wasn't writing. She was paralyzed and didn't know why. And now, as a result of this course, she is learning more about herself and her own creativity and is unblocked. And we get to hear what Lori has to share with us.
Can you wait a half an hour for me, please?
Okay, so I'm going to mute everybody but Lori, and I put mine on speaker view, and you might want to do the same.
Yeah, I did too.
Noxious.
Are you muting all of us, or are we muting ourselves?
Can you hear me, or am I on speaker?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I am?
Yes.
How do I mute myself? Oh, okay. Minimize virtual disconnect.
Julia,
Okay.
you're muted.
Should I get going?
Okay. Nope, because I have to mute all and then find you and unmute you.
Okay, I can unmute myself too.
Unmute yourself. Better.
Okay, So give me a thumbs up when I should start.
Okay.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm reading a story I wrote for a contest a few years ago, which had to include a very unusual element, and I'm sure you'll figure that out by the end of the story. It's called Individual Results May Vary. Synopsis. Brian thought anything was better than going through life fat and alone. That is, until an experimental weight loss program left him with more than just a bad taste in his mouth. Individual results may vary. Brian thought about killing Eve. Not if, but how. He knew there was only a slim chance of killing her and living to tell about it, but any consequence was worth it to shut her up. You can't eat that, Eve shrieked as Brian reached for a cracker. You're already over your carb limit for the day. Do you want to get fat again? How selfish can you be? This broken record had begun playing the day they came home from the treatment center on a constant loop ever since. Yeah, I'd love to be fat again, Brian thought, reaching for a goddamn celery stick. When I was fat, I was alone. Alone. That thought transformed the celery into double chocolate cheesecake. Brian thought of the day that changed his life forever. 1 year ago, 2120. Science fiction had come true in technology and medicine. Extinct now referred to diseases, not animals. But one chronic condition refused to be eradicated. Americans were still fat. No, not fat, obese. And while 250 was the new thin, that was a speck in Brian's rearview mirror. At 600 plus and counting, Brian dwarfed even the grossly obese. Like every fat person, he had a story of how he got there. Through college, he was in great shape, an athlete who scored on and off the field. When Brian met Linda, chemistry turned to passion, with graduation and wedding bells both scheduled for June. All that changed, though, as Brian stood at the front of the campus chapel, waiting for a bride who never came. He likely would have stood there forever, in a fog of embarrassment and confusion, if not for his best man, who not only led him away, but also invited the guests to stay for the reception anyway because, well, what the hell? It was paid for and there was beer. Brian told anybody that would listen that he just pulled up a chair to the buffet table that night and hadn't stopped eating since. A fantastic job and enormous salary only heightened all of his appetites and made it easier for him to become a big man in every way. Of course, that didn't mean that Brian didn't want to lose weight. He tried all the magic programs, the pills, the fad diets, the miracle creams. Each left him angrier, more desperate, and fatter. Fast forward to a year ago. Brian had long since sworn off the cures, resigning himself to being fat and alone for the rest of his life. Then he saw the ad. Are you morbidly obese? Are you alone? Let the Meiosis Transformation Clinic solve both of your problems. Apply today to be part of our revolutionary program, which will end obesity while providing companionship. You deserve to be happy. Come join us today. Brian eagerly signed on the dotted line when told he was an ideal candidate for the program. So what if it was an experimental study involving new surgery? What did he have to lose except this goddamn weight? And they promised he would also leave the facility with a woman, and not just any woman. They assured him their scientific process would produce a match for him that was as close as humanly possible, and guaranteed that she would go home with him without argument. Brian didn't know or care how they were going to make it happen. All he knew was he was going home thin and with a woman, and it only took a week. The day of the procedure, Brian showed up as instructed with just the fat clothes on his back. The clinic would provide his new wardrobe since none of his old clothes would fit anymore. After signing the forms, he watched a nurse put a needle in his arm to start the anesthetic. See you in a week, he remembers her saying as he peacefully drifted off. Why the hell did you buy 2% milk? Eve's condescending shout snapped Brian out of his daydream. You were right there with me, Eve, he responded through clenched teeth. If you wanted skim, why didn't you say something then? You know I can't see what you're doing on that side, she snapped. That's how you snuck the crackers into the house, isn't it? You're trying to kill us both. I don't know where this paranoia is coming from, Eve, but you must know it's in my best interest to take care of both of us, Brian replied. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to get something from the desk. Eve grunted in response, but nonetheless lifted herself up so that she and Brian could walk across the room in unison, as they had done for the past year since emerging from the meiosis transformation clinic as conjoined twins. What's so important you have to read it now, she barked. The juicer isn't working right, Brian replied as he rifled through the desk drawer. I want to find the manual and the warranty. Here it is. As Brian angled to pull the manual out of the drawer, a forgotten pamphlet fell to the floor. Brian picked it up. You better get that juicer working right, Eve shrieked. We can't go without our healthy smoothies. Don't worry, Eve, I will, he muttered automatically. Okay, I have what I need. We can sit down. They clumsily plopped down on the couch. As Eve returned to her tablet, Brian opened the pamphlet and began reading. Meiosis Transformation Clinic, Precautions After Surgery. Under no circumstances should you consume any type of alcoholic beverages post-surgery. Because of the complexity of your procedure, this could cause an imbalance of the dual chemistry, likely resulting in the eventual death and surgical removal of your companion. Should you accidentally ingest alcohol, please report back to the clinic at once for emergency treatment. Brian looked up from the brochure and smiled at Eve. You know, Eve, it's been a year since we've been together, he said sweetly. I think that calls for a drink.
I love it, Lori. I was trying so hard to send you a message, but for some reason my message wouldn't go to you.
Oh.
And I love it, Lori. I'm sitting here laughing over that. Darn, too good.
But it wasn't going to be funny.
Oh, it was hysterical.
Even science fiction has to have comic relief.
Oh, it was awesome. Thank you, Lori. I can't wait to read the book.
Well, thank you.
That's very good. So
I
much
sent-
fun.
I sent you a message, and it was talking about how you handled the dialogue. So it was great.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
How do you send these files?
Oh, go up to chat
I did. I have chat on.
and then look and see.
enter.
There's a little,
Oh,
when you have chat, there'll be a little box under everyone where you can type a message.
Well, I typed, okay, there it is. Okay, it came up. Whew.
Okay,
Thank
that
you,
was great, Lori. Thank you very much. You can
Well,
continue
thank
to
you.
make comments as you like to. How do you feel? Was that good?
Oh, yeah.
I'm really thrilled that everybody responded so well. So it's great to be first. Now I can relax and enjoy everybody else's readings.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
good.
next we're going to hear from Barbara Williams Cosentino. And Barbara is a psychotherapist and a freelance writer in Forest Hills, New York. Her first poem was My Grandmother's Trunk, which got published in Chubby Girl magazine. And since then, she's been published in a number of places, including the New York Times, Next Avenue, Medscape, and a bunch of other places. 5 weeks ago when we met, she feared she would never write again because she was working so hard, coming home and crashing in front of Netflix, just eating a bunch of snacks. Does anybody relate to this?
Oh, yeah.
So she's grateful to have shifted her focus and written a bunch of free association writing, which brought her to a new big idea. I don't know if that's precisely what she's sharing tonight, but she's sharing essays about Aunt Essie and other people I've sort of loved. I'm going to go to speaker view. I'm going to hit mute all. Barbara, you're going to unmute yourself, and then we're going to all enjoy you. So I'm muting everybody, and then you're going to unmute yourself. Okay, Barbara, are you ready for that?
Okay.
I'll give you a thumbs up when I have to mute myself.
Okay. This is not about Aunt Essie. That's another day. This is called Scrabble is another word for love. Did you and Daddy play Scrabble when I was little, Mom? I asked one day, watching her as she shuffled the tiles on her wooden rack, trying to find a way to use all of her letters at once. Her face darkened. We used to play when you were a baby, she said. But once she started walking, you would scream for hours, and I couldn't do anything to make you stop. I'd walk the floor with you all night, and Daddy and I never got to play anymore. I couldn't apologize when I was little. I couldn't use my words yet, and I was too busy throwing up. On her shoulder, in my crib, all over the stroller and the high chair. I guzzle my formula. Okay. The formula would come up spewing all over the place like the girl from The Exorcist. Dr. Shankman said it was a milk allergy. Grandma said it was because Mom fed me too fast. My mother said it was because I hated her. When my father fed me, I hardly ever threw up. Before I had you, I smelled like White Shoulder's perfume, my mother told me. Once you were born, I reeked of vinegar and dead people. It was a nightmare. Sorry, Mom, I said. Back at the game, my mother looked at the board where I had made the word night on my last turn. She chose 4 letters, M-A-R-E, from her rack and added them to mine. I could make the word nightmare, she said cheerfully. Your turn, Bobby. I played zone, triple word score, 39 points, I said. When I was growing up, our home was filled with Sinatra music, cigarette smoke, and Scrabble. From the time I can remember, my parents would be sitting at the Scrabble board, scrambling tiles, hoping for an S or a blank, 2 tiles that would lead to high-scoring moves. I'd fall asleep lulled by the sound of the wood piles clacking away, the rhythm interrupted only by an occasional bingo when one of them used all their tiles at once for a whopping 50-point bonus. When I was 8, my parents bought me a junior Scrabble set for Hanukkah. They were dismayed and then amused when I opened it, burst into tears and sobbed, "No, I want the grown-up one." My gift was exchanged at Macy's for the regular version, and my lifelong love affair with the game officially began. One dreary January day, something wonderful happened. My mother got a job as a manicurist at the Cut and Curl Salon. She had to work on Friday nights, so that became date night for Daddy and me. After I prepared our dinner, I pulled down the Scrabble set in its scraggly brown box, the corners carefully taped and retaped, and set it on the Formica kitchen table. Dad's nicotine-stained fingers would fly as he'd slap down the word, count up the points, and write down our scores. We'd play 2 games, maybe 3. Around 9, Scrabble night, date night would end when I'd hear Mom's key in the door. She'd sit down with a glass of orange no-cal soda, and together she and I would count the quarters she had gotten as tips. My father would smoke a Marlboro and have a cup of Sanka, the brown granules clinging to the side of the cup. "How were your games, Bobby?" she would ask, but I knew she really didn't care. On the night she wasn't working, I would usually play a game or 2 with my father while she sat at the table with us, doing the crossword in the newspaper or talking loudly on the marigold wall telephone. Her gravelly smoker's voice was distracting, and once I said, "Please, Ma, do you have to talk on the phone now?" I will never forget her words. "You stole my Scrabble partner," she said without smiling. "What am I supposed to do when you and Daddy are playing?" I played with her 2 sons more out of guilt than anything else. Once in a while we would all play together, but Scrabble is best when there's only 2 people. By the time I was 11 or 12, I was beating one or the other fairly often. Once my mother told me I had a natural gift for the game. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, she said. I had no idea what apples had to do with Scrabble, but I smiled, thrilled with the look of pride on her face. As I started doing what teenagers did, hanging out with friends or letting boys fill me up in the movie theater on Main Street, I played Scrabble less often. And when I went to college in upstate New York, my mother got a Scrabble partner back. Toward the end of my sophomore year, Dad turned yellow and his stomach swelled as if someone had pumped him full of helium. 3 months later, he was dead. The summer after he died, my mother and I played Scrabble obsessively. It was comforting and familiar at a time when life was otherwise filled with sorrow. We both missed my father desperately. Mom moved to Florida several years after I got married. During our infrequent visits, she and I would play a few games while my husband watched TV. Even when she was in her 80s, my mother would win more often than not. We played our last game when she was about 92, still living alone, sharp as a scalpel. Her eyes were bad, she said. I don't have the patience anymore. She died 3 weeks shy of 97. And now my best and only Scrabble partner is a computer app. Especially now in the time of social distancing and stay-at-home orders, I play many, many times a day, missing the camaraderie and the excitement of a live opponent. I think of my mother often, sometimes trying to figure out if I really did steal her Scrabble partner. If so, did she ever really forgive me? And why was my dad so willing to be stolen? And that, I think, is another story about families and alliances and love, and only a little bit about Scrabble. That's it, guys.
That was wonderful. We're all unmuted if you want to make a comment.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
You have a lot of great comments there.
There was so much sensory experience every step of the way, like the gravelly voice and just everything. It just was very, and it was very moving, Barbara. Very, very touched my heart.
And Barbara,
Thanks.
because I know you,
Oh,
you created tears within me because I know. Very well done.
Thank you.
right.
Paula
It
was
was
my
very
roommate. Paula was my roommate in nursing school way back when.
Wow.
Way back when.
Well, like I think I said at our class the other day, you know, especially when you're Irish, you say "I love you" in different ways, you know, and that just proves it.
Right? Weird ways, yeah. Weird.
It was very interesting. I loved it, Barbara. I learned a lot more about you and about, you know, the interchange of family relations and how it works, and how a game or something can also bring you together, so that you don't have to talk. You could probably be playing a lot more, and so you don't have to have that relationship. But it was less isolating in the family, and I guess there was a whole thing between the parents, you know, the mother being jealous of the father and so forth. So it's kind of gives me a little more of who you are, and how you grew up, and you know, and so forth. So I was very, very interesting. I thank you.
Thank you.
It's been extremely difficult to grow up in a home where your mother resented you so much.
Really good point.
I'm the only child. I used to make jokes. I was the least favorite child, which isn't really all that funny, but with a glass of wine, it's pretty
so
funny.
often our jokes that we make to cope, like as a child, are not really funny. Right? When you hear them as an adult, you're like, God, that's pitiful.
Yeah.
Really. We're going to move on to Kathleen, and if you continue to have comments for Barbara, feel free to put them in the comments, in the chat.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank
that was
you,
wonderful.
Barbara.
Thank you.
It was wonderful.
Enjoyed it, Barbara.
Okay, Kathleen Cosgrove. Kathleen called me a few months ago and wanted to get started on this path of matching her creativity and writing again. And then she started a new job and everything started getting very, very busy, and yet she still wanted to do it. So here she is juggling everything and trying to write this book that's been in her head a long while about adopting her daughter. And so her piece today is called What Lies Ahead. I'm going to put it on speaker view, mute everybody. Kathleen, you unmute yourself. I'm going to give that direction every time, apparently. Okay, I'm muting all.
It's a story about adoption, and for those who have been on this journey, how it can be filled with many unexpected twists and turns, and I welcome your feedback. The 4 remaining families, including us, were assigned a social worker to monitor our progress during the final weeks of the parenting class. The first meeting to start the home study process was quite lengthy. After 6 grueling weeks, the meetings shortened and tapered until we found ourselves anticipating when the final report would be ready. The term home study may describe the purpose, but does not encapsulate the various content of what's included in the report in its entirety. An actual home study is traditionally done by an adoption agency for the purpose of painting a full picture and embodiment of a family considering adoption, warts and all. We were surprised to be assigned an intern to pre-assess our qualifications. Her name was Carrie, and she worked for an agency called the Home for Little Wanderers in the adoption unit, which at the time was overseen by the State Department of Children and Families. Carrie was a student intern working for DCF and assigned a position at the home. She was in her senior year of grad school, working toward a master's in social work. Carrie initially presented herself as a vibrant, eager, knowledgeable overseer. The first day she arrived at our home, her visit was unremarkable. She stepped across the threshold carrying a mahogany leather shoulder strap briefcase over her left shoulder and a notebook with a pen stuck in the spiral binder in her right hand. The pen was a flashy gold Papermate, which she later used to take copious notes. During our initial interview, sitting 1 on the couch and 2 in the French provincial high-back chairs, Carrie proceeded to gather information about our family and our plans to adopt. Her questions were common and procedural. Nonetheless, the click, click of her pen started to annoy me. I just wished she'd look up and listen with full eyes on us for a change and make us feel like she was interested in us, or at least pretend she was engaged in what we had to say. No matter what we said, she wrote it down, like an amateur practicing a routine that eventually would become routine. Eventually, I'd reached a saturation point and could not stand another click before I asked her, "Can you tell me, what are all those notes you're taking being used for? We've already disclosed most of the stuff you're asking about to the facilitators, and during the application process, it's nerve-wracking sitting here, watching you with your head down, writing what seems like our every word. Couldn't you have brought a tape recorder, clicked it on, and made eye contact with us when you talk to us? I feel like you're looking to find something wrong when there is nothing. Is it common practice to be writing all these notes?" She looked up from her legal-sized notepad. "Oh," she responded, smiling an oblivious smile. "Try to ignore me if you can. So sorry. Am I making you uncomfortable?" She didn't wait for my response. "It's my job to report on your progress. I have a good caseload of prospective adoptive parents, so I try to get my notes done during the interview. so that I don't have to do them later. Sorry if this is unpleasant for you, but that's the process. I wondered to myself if it was her intent to be rude, to throw us off guard, or is she simply self-absorbed with an attitude? Her words, her actions, and her body language was anything but reassuring, or professional for that matter. I was not getting a good feeling about the way Carrie was handling our case. I didn't trust her. Jake was not fully engaged or taking the process as seriously as I was. And I thought, and he thought she was just weird. The next week, Carrie returned to our home to observe and talk to us again. On this day, she was extremely chatty and hyper. I suspected she was either on something or running on very little sleep because of her disorganized euthymic presentation. We moved into the living room where the atmosphere was cozy and aesthetically calming. Jake and I had put together a plate of cheeses, raw vegetables and dip, various breads, fruit, crackers, and spreads. Carrie plopped herself down on the couch, bent forward, and reached right in, voraciously sampling the colorful, inviting platter of hors d'oeuvres. In between bites, she was taking sips of homemade raspberry lemonade. "This is good stuff," she smacked her lips as she talked. "What's in it?" she boldly asked. Jake and I were sitting across from each other, our knees affectionately touching, demonstrating our close union and our solidarity as a couple. We were looking beyond the coffee table at Carrie, our eyes gawking at her like two little owl chicks, waiting for a sign from the mother hen that it would be okay to fly from the nest. The sign never came. Instead, she announced, "I feel so comfortable here. You two have created a lovely home." A flip-flopping of roles was a frustrating dynamic working with this immature social worker. Speaking for myself, I was not buying into her lack of self-awareness. She demonstrated a need for better supervision or a new career path. Jealousy is not a trait in my makeup. Nonetheless, while I observed Carrie and the uniquely separate way she engaged with each of us, I was intrigued and taken by her flirtatious interest in my husband. There's something about Jake's nature that is attractive to women. He has a way of making women feel supported and cared for, cared enough about to be themselves. Obviously, Carrie was lacking something in her life to want the comfort of a married man. Maybe she has daddy issues, I thought. Carrie focused her gaze on my husband while directing her questions to both of us. When my husband chose to answer, her body language was distinct. She'd flex her torso forward, arching her back so that her lady parts were distinctly erect. She leaned slightly forward and propped her elbows on her knees, with her upper arms tightly aligned by her sides, as if to squeeze her breasts together ever so slightly, showing off the dark mystery of her crevice and the curves of her supple young breasts. Her perky nipples outlined a rise in her thin cotton shirt, and Jake was definitely noticing. After she left, I thought about what was more important, arguing with Jake about keeping his typical male drive in check, his libido response to an immature 20-year-old intern's flirtation, or getting through the assessment process to have a home study done. I decided to let the matter go for now. All the prospective adoptive parents were required to attend weekly meetings that were run by the adoption agency representative in Children's Services. We were encouraged to bring family members. Jake and I invited my mother. Jake loved my mother and he trusted her opinion. The two of them got along like indentured friends, often laughing together and conversing for hours. They had a similar perspective on life. She understood Jake and he warmed up to that. The meetings were held in a community church basement on the outskirts of the city. When we arrived, the meeting had just about gotten underway. The facilitators were getting ready to speak. People were filing in, moving metal chairs into rows, and the chattering sounds of hopeful foster parent candidates and their familial guests filled the room. The facilitator had picked up a remote and begun pointing it at the white screen hanging from the ceiling. Someone clicked the lights off and the slide presentation began. Parenting an Adoptive Child. I perused the room, a typical church basement with amber-colored linoleum tiled floors and large, round metal strategically placed two-tone painted poles, cream on the top and brown on the bottom half. The walls were painted gunmetal gray, and the long fluorescent tube lighting dated the basement decor somewhere around the late 60s. There was a working kitchen with a snack counter at the far end of the room. The kitchen had a huge industrial stainless steel oven, a massive dishwasher, ample food prep counters, a wide porcelain sink, and metal cabinets painted white hung along the walls above the counters. I imagined all the family members of the church congregation that would come and be fed and engage in conversation for social hour after each service. They'd enjoy a cup of freshly made coffee, compliments of the church ladies who were dedicated to feeding the service goers every Sunday. My heart thumped thinking about the lifelong friendships that must have started here and been nurtured by the parish community over the years. The new congregants, soon to become familiar, enjoying that fresh cup of coffee, a smile, and a slice of something warm and homemade, courtesy of the church ladies. While my daydream was flourishing along nicely, I imagined children running and swinging around the poles, and the Unitarian elders softly asking them to slow down and take a seat at the crafting table, where they'd be asked to draw pictures of religious symbols, or people singing in the church choir, or Jesus telling parables to the children sitting in a meadow, listening intently to him while baby lambs romped in the lush green sun-drenched clover nearby. The crafting table was usually overseen by a group of church youth volunteering to watch the children while the parents socialized with each other. The youth had a way with the youngsters who naturally looked up to them, dreaming of the day when they would be the overseers. Perhaps I was initially distracted by the loud clacking of her low spiked heels along the shiny linoleum floor, and later the sway of her hips in the tightly fitted form of her forest green dress. What first emerged from around the corner were her long, smooth nylon tan legs, closed-toed black patent leather, female pumps elegantly cradling the shape of her foot, followed by her she curves and a distinct shade of glossy red coating her lips. Wow, I thought to myself, she's really working up to something that I don't see ending well. She fixed her confident gaze on Jake, who was reading the handouts for this week's class versus listening to the facilitator. He looked up and gazed straight ahead toward her. There she was, slowly gliding her backside up and down the pole while propping herself with one leg bent and her patent leather heeled foot lodged against the floor and the base of the pole. He couldn't miss her. None of us could. She was leaning on the pole that was aligned exactly perpendicular to the row my mother and I and Jake were sitting in. What's happening? Am I missing something here? I thought. We'd had a busy week and I was tired. I wanted the assessment process to be over and to feel like our plans for a family were moving ahead. I wanted acknowledgement that we were ready in the eyes of the state agency to parent one or two of their kids. According to Child Welfare Information, the Child Welfare Information Gateway, there are 135,000 children adopted each year in America from foster care, private and domestic agencies, from family members and internationally. 40% of these are from the US foster care system. Want me to wrap it up?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you. Wonderful. There were times when my jaw literally dropped, like when she's with her leg bent and whatever. Oh, I forgot to unmute our other friends who might have comments. You have a lot in the comments. What do we have to tell our friend Kathleen? That was wonderful.
I love the description of.
Yeah, I did too. Kathleen, I accidentally called you Cheryl, and I meant to say Kathleen. I'm listening at the same time I'm typing, and I saw Cheryl's name pretty much up there, and so it was like, and me is usually
hear what people have to say.
It's not posting my name, but that was awesome.
Thank you.
I'm dying to know what happened.
Yeah, me too.
That's the book. You got to buy the book for that.
Right.
Yep, I want to read that book.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was wondering how that was.
Some great writers in this class.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is beautiful to hear you guys reading your stuff. It's a wonderful experience to
Awesome.
what you've been working on. We're going to move on to Cheryl. If you have more comments for Kathleen, feel free to put them in the chat while we...
Cheryl, if I accidentally call you Kathleen, forgive me. I'm the airhead here, you know, so.
So Cheryl, it was a former Spanish teacher and school librarian. Cheryl introduced me to a phrase I hadn't heard before, CLI-SCI, which is climate science, like sci-fi stories about alternate universes in which the world is off its rails. And she's working on a YA book on that subject, and is going to read tonight from City of Ants. She tells us that 5 weeks ago, she needed some sort of outside force to compel her to sit down and write. As I said, we wrote together an hour a day for 5 weeks. So she's worked hard during this course and written over 10,000 words, just in our 1 hour a day, right? So she hopes to finish her novel, bring it to a literary agent, and get published. So let's hear what we have from Cheryl. It'll take me a little minute here to mute everybody. Cheryl, you unmute yourself, and then we're off to the races.
Is everyone muted? Okay. This is from City of Ants, Chapter 4. 6 weeks of basic training, climbing concrete walls with a 50-pound pack on his back, crawling through mud that gummed up his ears and nostrils, shooting beanbags at dummies made of corn husks and melons, and learning to sleep on dirt and rock, had turned a kid with spaghetti muscles and a couch potato butt into a weaponized fighting machine. But even after all that misery and pain, nothing had prepared Cal for life in the field. The guy in front of him could barely even stand, but he was wielding a stick like it was a machete and screaming in a language that sounded more like gibberish than anything with actual rules and grammar. Cal knew a little bit of Spanish, the dips and peaks of the language, but that's not what this was. "It's okay, put the stick down," he commanded, reaching out his arm and gesturing for the man to lower his weapon. The man was in no way open to listening. He brandished the stick again, his face wrinkling into an expression of anger, and shouted, "Adalahi," or at least that's what it sounded like to Cal. He looked over at C.O. Hobbs, his patrol partner. "How do you say put the stick down in Spanish?" Cal called to him. Hobbs looked up at the sky as if he were thinking, and his lips moved. He lowered his eyes back to Cal and shrugged. "Bajo something or other? I don't know the word for stick. It's something like pala, maybe, I think." Cal tried not to let his annoyance show. Hobbs was about as useful as a shovel made of dirt, and just as dumb, too. Still, he could sometimes supply a few Spanish words Cal didn't know. Cal looked back at the crazy guy with the stick. "Bajo the pala," he shouted in a voice that he hoped was both commanding but friendly. The guy cocked his head and gave them a funny look. He laughed and lowered the stick slightly. "I think he understands Spanish," Cal said. "Tell him we're here to help, but he needs to put down the stick. Tell him we've got water and food in our packs and there's shelter back at the camp." Let me think," Hobbs said, pushing back his helmet and running his hand over his bristly hair. "Soy amigos." He pointed at himself and Cal. "To ayudar. Hey agua y comer ensalado." He gestured behind him toward the camp, hidden behind miles of wind-shorn rocks and scruffy desert plants that had somehow avoided being hacked apart by nomads. The sky was clear and blue, so at least there was no haze to soften landmarks and turn them all into hulking monsters. But the sun's rays stabbed into a person's eyes like glass daggers, which was why he and Hobbs were wearing military-issue sunglasses over their eyes that made them look like some kind of human bug creatures. The man with the stick had no sort of eye protection, and wrinkles spidered away from his squinted eyes. Cal wondered how the guy had managed to keep from going sunblind. Doesn't mean he hasn't gone sun crazy, though, Cal thought to himself. Instead of putting down the stick, the old man just shouted at them some more, "Gavik Jagabang." Cal swore under his breath and put his arms out, trying to pacify the guy. Es bueno, he said, and took a few steps toward him. He did know that much Spanish. It's okay. Even if the guy he was speaking to had no idea what he was saying. His words did nothing to calm the man, though. Instead, he put one foot forward and went into a crouch, bracing himself to take Cal on. God damn it, Cal thought. Why do they have to act like a bunch of wild animals? He realized what he had just thought, and a prickle of shame ran through him. These are people, Cal, he reminded himself. People just like you. He hated it that he had to keep stamping these stamping down these thoughts, and he hated it more that these horrible thoughts kept popping up to begin with. But then again, they are growing death plants to make drugs somewhere, somehow, out in this wasteland. He stumbled a bit at the thought, but forced it out of his mind. He stepped forward once again, continuing to tell the old man, gently in Spanish, that everything was okay. All at once, the guy came at him, screaming, his face contorted angrily. Cal pushed forward to meet him, his hand still up, this time to shield himself from the fat stick in the man's hands. The man brought the stick down toward Cal's head, a frenzied look in his blood-red eyes. Cal shoved his right hand up and grabbed the stick in his palm. He didn't have time to take in the sting from the impact before he yanked the man forward, using the momentum from the stick for leverage, and wrapped his arm around the man's back, pushed him to the ground, and wrenched his hands behind him. The man let out a grunt as his chest hit the sand and the air was knocked out of him. With his knee on the old man's back, two things occurred to Cal. The fight had lasted less than 2 heartbeats, and the man was as stout as a pillow stuffed with straw and feathers. And now Cal was beginning to feel an ache spreading through his hand where he'd caught the old man's weapon. Damn it, Cal growled down at the man. Why do you people have to be so difficult? His ears were burning, his cheeks were burning, and his mind was burning. He yanked a zip tie out of his pocket, used it to wrap the guy's wrists together, and jerked him to his feet. As a soldier of the Civilian Military Corps, I'd like to welcome you to the city of Las Luces, he recited as he pushed the man forward. All refugees will be treated with respect and dignity and will have their basic needs met in accordance with their age, size, and special needs. All refugees will be given the opportunity to immigrate into the city of Las Luces by applying for an entry license and taking both a physical and an aptitude exam. He continued reciting all the drivel he'd been taught in basic. It was meant to offer the nomads hope, but it was 100% useless to an old man like this one. Decades ago, the city had actually allowed in refugees to work and even become full-fledged citizens. But that was back before there had been thousands of them and before they'd tried to bomb the city. Refugee workers had been a rarity in the city for as long as Cal could remember, but he'd heard the city council was more open to them now with falling birth rates among the citizens. Even so, an old man who could barely walk and couldn't speak English was not much of a candidate for citizenship. If you are in need of any help or have any questions or comments, please submit them at your nearest ration facility, Cal finished telling the man. Hobbs looked over at him with a grin on his face. How much of that do you think he understood? Somewhere between 0 and 0.01%, Cal shot back. Hobbs giggled, the sound high-pitched, like the howl of a coyote, putting Cal's nerves on a thorn's edge. Cal didn't care much for his partner. The guy was a wimp who made Cal walk ahead of him when they were on patrol and who never dealt with the nomads himself unless there were too many for Cal to handle on his own. And even then, only when Cal yelled at him to do so. He was lank and had the beginnings of a feathery beard on his chin that their JCO kept forcing him to shave off. But none of those qualities was really make or break for Cal. What did he care if the guy had a little pissant beard that made him look like a raggedy kid going through puberty? No, what did it in for Cal was the guy's idiotically backward, ignorant views on everything. He was always telling the worst jokes and then laughing in that yellow voice that sounded like a guitar string breaking. On a typical night, they'd be lying in their bunks, Cal tackling a crossword puzzle and Hobbs doing whatever he did, probably sticking his hands down his pants, when Hobbs would suddenly blurt out, "Hey, Varma." "What?" Cal would grumble back after a few seconds. "What's the difference between a chicken and a sand gypsy?" Hobbs would start another one of his lame jokes. Cal would sigh, "I don't know, Hobbs, what's the difference?" "A chicken smells good when it's roasted," he'd say and giggle. Cal would respond with a grimace. Bonfire smoke day and night at the edge of the nomads' tent city where dead bodies were disposed. The smell of it left Cal feeling like he had mold growing in his nose. That's not the end. I was just going to stop there.
Okay, that was great. Thank you, Cheryl. I felt very much like Cal. Did you
Oh, yeah, I was there. Man,
Mm-hmm.
that was awesome. It was so realistic, starting with the mud in his nose and everything. And then, and then I love that shovel, made of dirt, as useless as a shovel made of dirt. And then there's just so many, there was too many to say how much I loved it. Awesome, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Good dialogue.
Yeah, excellent dialogue.
And you have a lot of good chats, so when you get a second, you'll want to cut and paste them or read them at least.
Yeah.
Great, wonderful. And I love that this idea of like the world, you know, in the future without water, without whatever, and what kinds of things come up for how people become more like more human in that horrible way, right?
Yeah.
So next we have Karen Lynch. Karen is one of the only people who came to any of my classes so far who's already really well versed in the precepts or the research of creativity that I work with, deliberate creativity. She's actually, did you go to the school? Did you go to Buffalo State? I don't remember what you said. Or you just
No. I looked into the master's program, but haven't been myself.
Yeah. So I have my master's in Buffalo State, but she's involved in the community and is working with those things. But she still came and worked with us because she's a published writer and because she had never thought to take these same precepts, the same research of how the creative brain works and apply it to her writing, which is what I have done, which is what I do for a living. As basically, I think I'm the only one that I know of that does that in the community of creativity practitioners. Take it and apply it and change it a little bit to make it of value to writers. Anyway, tonight, Karen, who goes professionally by K.M. Langevin, had her hard drive breakdown and was not even going to be able to read to us except for the fact that her tech husband pulled it out at 5 minutes of 6. Unfortunately, she wasn't our first reader because her heart was pounding. But here we are, ready to hear from her. Welcome back to Bluebird.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was crazy. I was literally, waterwork. I was in a bad place. So thank you for
I'm going to mute everybody
acknowledge
yourself. I'm going to mute everybody and then you have to mute yourself.
Yep. Oh, I think I'm still unmuted. You can hear me, right?
We can hear you. Oh, I'm
okay.
Yeah.
So welcome back to Bluebird. I just want to give the backstory on it because it's a piece. It's not what I've been writing over the last 5 weeks. It's what I started writing in the last, I would say, week and a half after hearing your advice to another participant in the workshop, which was think about what you're avoiding when you pick up a new piece of something to work on, or you switch to something. And that was a big eye opener for me because I have a lot of started projects and not a lot of finished ones. So I decided that I was going to think about what I was avoiding by not finishing this one because I love this one. So anyway, thank you for that advice. Here I go. I don't need my glasses. All right. A January malaise settled over Maggie as she looked out the bay window in her living room. The front lawn lay brittle, more like straw than the green grass they paid good money to grow in the spring. The trunk of her favorite Japanese red maple stood hindered, cracked and barren in the cold. Not a car was visible in the cul-de-sac, so her eyes settled on the pavement, white-stained with residual salt from the DOT's sloppy cleanup job of last week's storm. Another nor'easter was approaching Connecticut from the Midwest, an eastern smackdown, according to the Weather Channel, a snowmageddon. How do they come up with these names, Maggie thought. A sigh escaped from within as the weight of her responsibilities pressed down upon her chest. She must prepare, she must provide, she must head out into the retail world with everyone else to stock up on bread and milk and whatever else they couldn't do without during a storm, just in case it took days before the plows could clear the town's roads. There are things she needs, of course, things she knows she can't live without, like coffee, more ice melt for the front walk, and a good working shovel. Tom was always such a slob. There was no way of knowing where she'd find a shovel in that mess of a garage. Maggie rolled her eyes and shook her head, inhaling as thoughts of his inability to stay organized slammed into her mind. How many times had she nudged him to put something away, only to find it tossed in a box or a bin within feet of the door to the basement? Tom used to head down to get something benign, like a roll of duct tape or a screwdriver, only to come back upstairs holding something else, some surprise that he'd previously sworn he'd thrown away. "Looky here," he'd say in a celebratory voice. "Isn't this that booklight you were looking for last September?" It was like Christmas for him. Every time he found something he'd misplaced. His childlike joy over those discoveries irritated her so when he was still alive. How nasty of fate to make that quality endearing now that he had passed. Fate was a bitch, for sure. I'll have to deal with that mess, Maggie thought as she exhaled, controlling the smile that was attempting to change her facade. I'll purge everything, I'll get a dumpster, and I'll get it done. If I survive this storm. An hour later, Maggie returned from Target with a brand new lime green shovel, some Pet Safe ice melt, cream, and enough coffee K-cups to get her through the days ahead. Oh, and that 1-pound bag of Twizzlers. The bare necessities, she snickered to herself as she opened the bag of Twizzlers even before she put the cream in the fridge. The cul-de-sac was still empty. Knowing her neighbors' cars were likely parked in their pristine garages made her uneasy. Maggie and Tom hadn't been able to park a car in their garage since, well, it had been a long time. She didn't remember the last car they'd parked inside. That's how long it had been. Maybe after the girls were born, because they had earmarked their garage as storage for strollers and bicycles and sports gear. It soon became the venue for bags headed to Goodwill or unseasonal holiday decorations, a hoarder's stockpile of old electronics products and empty boxes that once housed those electronic products, but now just took up space of their own. She was glad she got that new shovel, though. She groaned as she faced the fact that she'd have to wake up at 5 o'clock the next morning, an hour before her natural wake cycle, to make sure she could get the car up the driveway, unless they parked it in that cul-de-sac tonight. She'd have to dig herself out, even if the girls had a snow day. She'd have to get to that job interview. It was a job she desperately wanted, a job that would help her keep the house. There, she couldn't even go. Losing the house was unfathomable. The house that her girls spent their entire childhoods in. The house she and Tom moved into the week before their wedding day, ate takeout food in before their furniture showed up, and made love in while waiting for the moving trucks, to baptize the house and bless it and make it their own. But with 12 years left on the mortgage, making those payments was critical. She hadn't worked in 17 years, not since the day she gave birth to Cassandra. The moment she heard her oldest daughter cry, her focus was on motherhood. Not a bone in her body ever felt torn about her decision to be a stay-at-home mom. She cherished being the one to change every diaper, wipe every nose, clean every scrape, make every meal. The thought of working outside the home while her girls were still under her roof made her feel like the elevator floor was dropping out from under her. But that life insurance policy that they'd been able to get for Tom was only $250,000, which didn't go far in Fairfield County. Cassie's first college tuition payment would be due in just a few months. Maggie wasn't sure when Tom's Social Security benefits would start kicking in, and she wanted to show the girls that she could take care of them, that she didn't need a man to make her life stable, that she could take care of herself. Focus on doing the next right thing, she said aloud as she grabbed another Twizzler and continued to put away the groceries. No sense letting those big worries seep further into her day. Mom, look! Jessica had come downstairs while Maggie stood in the kitchen waiting for her coffee to brew. She was looking out at the same picture window Maggie looked out earlier that day, but with a little joy in her heart and little trace of anxiety. Forcing herself out of her thoughts and turning her attention to her youngest daughter, Maggie walked over to see what was happening outside. 2 cardinals sat on the squirrel-proof feeder that Tom had given her for Christmas. They'd put it on the Japanese red maple so she could watch the birds every day, especially while enjoying that morning brew. It was a lovely gift, really, truly from his heart. The memory of his expression when she opened the box made her eyes well up with tears. Just remember, he'd said when she opened the box and lifted the feeder up for the girls to see, keep it full once you start. The birds will come to rely on it as a food source, especially when the weather gets rough. Now, how do you know that? Maggie said in reply, knowing full well that he couldn't care less about the birds and was simply humoring her. Because I'm brilliant, he suggested. Maggie gave him a look to know Maggie gave him a look they all knew to mean she didn't buy it. But Jessica laughed, beaming at her father when he spoke, unable to contain her admiration. She'd missed the memo that 13-year-old girls rarely liked their parents. All right, fine, he conceded. The woman who works at the Audubon Center told me. Merry Christmas, my love. He leaned over his cup of coffee and kissed Maggie right on the lips, then cast a long look of love into her eyes to show his devotion was unchanged in their 20 years of marriage. Ew, Cassie uttered as she rolled her eyes. At 16, she was beyond the days of humoring her father. Any parental display of affection made her uncomfortable. She voiced her dissent by walking out of the room into the kitchen to grab a cinnamon bun. Weeks after that day, Maggie could still smell the sweet, woody smell of their traditional Christmas breakfast. It was impossible to believe that Tom's heart would fail them before the new year began. The feeder's empty, Mom, Jess said, bringing her back to the present. Maggie put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. If only they could remain frozen in time. But the natural world wasn't stopping for grief, and they needed to get those feeders filled before the storm. As if on cue, the first snowflakes fell from the sky. That's it.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Aww.
Yeah, you have a lot of really nice feedback in the comments, and that was really lovely. Any feedback for Karen? KM. KM.
Yeah, you can call me Karen.
It was great, Karen. It's very well written. Very, very, it really shows the inside of this woman looking out, you know, at everything in her life and her worry about the bills and the way she's going forward in the future, worrying about it, the anxiety, when then she brings herself back to the moment after building up all this fear over how she's going to pay, you know, and for the mortgage and keep the house and everything. And then it brings her back to the present. And I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
I like that it was low stakes, but still quite gripping, you know? Nobody's dying. There isn't a caper, you know? But it was still quite gripping.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Very nice. Very nice.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have one more reader tonight, and that is our friend Jan McElroy.
There's no one after me?
Charlene's not here, so I guess not. So,
okay.
Anyway.
I can take my time a little bit.
Okay. So, Jan, you might remember, had two cartoon characters in her bio of Ducky and Koala. She spent a long and loving life with her husband, Patrick, who died about 3.5 years ago. And she was always the koala bear, he was always the duck, and she's been drawing cartoons on envelopes and letters for him for all these years as they moved around the country. So what she's working on these last 5 weeks is finishing this love story to end all love stories. And that's what she is here to share with us today. Now, Jan, remember, I'm going to unmute everybody, mute everybody, and then you unmute yourself, okay?
Okay.
Okay, you're ready to go.
Okay, here I am. It was just kind of hard because I had to make the screen big again. Okay, I'm writing about the love of my life, Patrick, who died 3.5 years ago. I will always love him, and I know that one day we will be together again. Patrick, my sweet yellow ducky, and I, Jan, his sweet brown koala bear, met when we were still quite young. I was about 10 years old, and Pat was 15 at the time. He was my older brother's best friend in high school. I liked and trusted Patrick completely from the first. He was just that kind of person. Ours was a small town in Northern California, and we knew the same places and people. We went to the same elementary school. When I was 12 and Pat was 17, I developed a huge crush on him. He remembered hearing giggling behind him, and he'd turn around and I'd run away. He was so very handsome, a hard worker, very honest, trustworthy, and reliable. And he had a very distinctive voice, almost Bostonian accent, and warm, like I'd never heard before. And he had a great laugh. After he and my brother graduated from high school, Patrick joined the U.S. Air Force. I didn't see him again for 8 long years. My mother, who had always liked Patrick, and I used to talk about him sometimes. We wondered where he was and what he was doing. Despite going on with my life, Pat was always there in the back of my mind. I wondered how he was and if life was treating him well. I moved over to the Mendocino coast. I loved the ocean and the redwoods, the fog and rain. I loved the ferns and the blackberry, raspberry, and huckleberry bushes and the rhododendrons. It was so beautiful there. I worked at several jobs, including washing dishes at a local restaurant, working on a party boat, tying crab pots, and filleting fish. But living there was very expensive, and eventually I just couldn't afford it. I ended up moving back to my mom's in the old hometown when I was 21. It turned out to be the best move I've ever made, because in 1982, Pat came back and checked to see if any of my family was still around. By then, of course, I was an adult woman, and it was love at first sight for both of us. We didn't actually express what we felt for each other at that first meeting, but we both felt it. Patrick returned to Southern California where he lived and worked, but he called me a few days later, and after that first call, we ended up talking by phone and writing to each other often, developing an intense long-distance romance. My mom was ecstatic about it. She had always loved Patrick, and she was extremely happy to see the two of us fall in love. Pat was in the U.S. Air Force Reserve, and he also had some commitments at his civilian job to finish before he could return to our hometown. In the course of our long-distance conversations and love letters, we ended up creating our sweet yellow ducky and sweet brown koala bear relationship in cartoons. Patrick made up the story of how the ducky and koala met. He said my eucalyptus tree was right next to his pond, and that one day a big wind came up and blew me out of my tree. I landed in his pond, and the brave ducky swam to me and saved me from drowning. I cartooned the story, making a little book about it. That book and the cartoons I was drawing on the back of the envelopes I sent him became the rough basis of our ducky and koala love story. It took about 2 months for Patrick to wrap up loose ends in Southern California and come back to me. When he finally returned, I suddenly became very shy. I was able to be bold and daring on the phone and by mail, but the day he pulled his pickup truck into my mother's driveway, I could barely bear the emotions I felt. The anticipation and some uncertainty overwhelmed me. When he came to the front door, I was hiding behind my mother, giggling. He reached around her and pulled me into his arms, kissing me, and it was just heaven. I felt so loved, so safe, and so happy. We lived with my mom for about 4 or 5 months. We often went to the local lake to feed the ducks there, which was one of our favorite things to do. We traveled over to the Mendocino coast and sat on the big bench overlooking the bluffs in the town of Mendocino. Big bench is huge, and it makes you feel like a child again because you feel so small sitting on it. We even made love on a lonely beach one night inside of a sleeping bag. It was very romantic, risky though, but the fear of being caught only heightened our feelings of romance. It was an evening I'll never forget, with the waves crashing down on the sand, the stars above us in the night sky, slowly disappearing as the fog began to creep in. I'm sorry, hold on, let's see. I can't get the page to, oh, it's over here, sorry. As fog began to creep in. It was wonderful. We adored each other. Patrick decided to return to the service full time so we could be married. He ended up being stationed at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, and as soon as he could, he sent for me. He had found us a little condominium trailer in a park where we lived until we got a house on the base. On June 4th, 1983, we were married. My mom and Pat's parents flew out to be with us, and his dad, Reggie, who I adored, walked me down the aisle. Pat's first sergeant was Pat's best man, and our neighbor, Mary, served as my maid of honor. A very dear friend of mine back home made my wedding dress, which was beautiful. Pat wore his dress uniform, and he looked even more handsome than ever. It was probably one of the smallest weddings in the world, but it was the best. Patrick would have given me whatever I wanted. If I'd wanted a huge wedding or an engagement ring and or an expensive wedding ring, but I couldn't see putting ourselves in debt. I opted to keep everything very small, and Pat and I chose 2 wedding rings, 2 simple gold bands, one for him and one for me. I didn't want diamonds, I just wanted him. After our wedding, Pat's friends in his shop threw him a congratulatory party. Patrick came home afterwards, drunk as a skunk. Normally, Pat was kind of shy, not with all that alcohol in him. He stripped out of his fatigues and walked around our home naked as a blue jay. Then he told me that he was going to go outside like that and run around the trailer park. I didn't believe him. He grabbed the front door and out he went. I rushed for him and dragged him back inside. Drunk, naughty ducky. I learned the ins and outs of being a military spouse, the realities of the separations that came during TDYs, deployments, and war games. I missed my ducky desperately during those times, being newly married, but it is all part of being a military spouse. I was very proud of Patrick and his service, and I loved our new life. I was proud to be his wife. Thanks to Patrick and to the U.S. Air Force, I got to travel and see some of the world. We were stationed for over 3 years in Europe, which was one long honeymoon for us. I feel so grateful for everything Pat brought to my life. We were married for 34 years, and I'm writing this book in memory of him. He was the love of my life, and I was very blessed to have him. We were blessed to have one another. Not everyone gets a love like ours. The book opens with a cartoon of the koala up in her eucalyptus tree and the ducky swimming in his pond below. It closes with a cartoon of the koala kneeling next to a small white cross by the pond, with the ducky as an angel in the eucalyptus tree above, watching his koala bear.
Very touching. Thank you very much.
For sure.
Everybody's unmuted if you want to comment on Jan. You have a lot of comments in the chat. That was lovely.
Yeah, beautiful story.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, just wonderful.
Just the voice and the tone is very loving.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you guys agree? Like there's something about just how you tell the story that is very clearly.
Yeah.
Very, very touching.
Thank you.
Very touching.
Yeah, you can hear the love, right? The love is audible.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I like the using the characters of the koala and the duck to describe, because when you get the images of a koala and a duck, they're such different creatures, but at the same time, to have them come together is just really expresses.
Right, they're both lovable.
What we had. Yeah, we were blessed. Yeah, it was great. So thank you, Julia, for your help too, because I never would have gotten it written without this class. You know, it really helped me. Thank you. Now I have to put in the excerpts and the cartoons and everything, but it helped me a lot. All those tools. So thank you.
So that concludes our evening. I really want to thank our 6 readers and for everyone.
How do we save the comment?
You have to cut and paste. If you want to
hold on.
I can help you do that.
Okay.
I took images of everything and I'll put them on our Facebook page.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Cheryl.
Cheryl is extremely adept.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
I very much enjoyed every single one of your readings.
Yeah.
It was all so lovely. And your touching vulnerability really affected me tonight. Each of you in different ways. I've put comments
Thank you.
that say more to each of you what I observed, but what a lovely evening. Thank you.
You know, you really put your finger on it when you talk about vulnerability, because just whether or not you're writing vulnerably, you're stepping up to a mic and sharing something that's new. And that's a lot of what is so moving about this, so touching about this.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. This is my first time listening. I've been in a writing class before, but it's not the same as right now with the Zoom. It's really very nice. And each one is different and each one is a voice of their own. So it's very nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
7 different flights, you know, of imagination.
And Julia has done a wonderful job of really making it a very safe, comfortable place. So that's why we've been able to be vulnerable, because everybody in the group has been really warm and supportive, and it's from Julia all the way down. So thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
That's beautiful.
It means a lot to me. Thank you.
It was great. Yeah.
It was great.
Every writer. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sandra?
Yeah, I was going to say how great it really is. Wonderful to hear the story from the writer, because you get a lot more than just reading the book. Seeing them reading it gives you a feeling of warmth and personal. You feel more personal, and I love that. So thank you very, very much. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of the readings, and I couldn't figure out how to really write anything. I don't know, somehow it just wasn't working, but I just want to know that it was really wonderful. Thank you very much.
You have to move your cursor across the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, you'll see chat. If you draw your cursor across the bottom of the screen, you'll see
Right.
a balloon.
I saw chat, but for some reason they kept having one name that was on the chat. I couldn't seem to, I could see them writing it, but I couldn't see myself doing it. And anyway, I was listening more intently. So if you really thought to write, you lose some of the words.
Yeah.
I was conscious of commenting quickly so I didn't miss things. I agree with you. Yeah.
Right. But I loved everybody's, and they were all different, but they were all very personal. And I really love that, you know. I think it's hard. I'm an artist, so I know how hard it is to sort of get yourself out there, you know. In any way, I'm a painter, so I know that someone looking at my work, it's similar to what you're reading and people listening to you, as opposed to you write a book and nobody really sees you. They only they can see you through the book, but they can't see you and themselves. So this was very, very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's all to Julia. Thank you, Julia. Thank you. Yeah, Julia deserves a round of applause. Yep. She was great.
You guys, it really takes a lot to prepare something. You guys were, some of you are here from the last reading, from the last class, Joanne and Kathy and Diane. You know what it took. You knew I'm sure you know what it took, and then also how you felt afterwards. Like, it's a great feeling to come through that vortex, share something, and be accepted and and approved of. It's a wonderful.
Yes. It was very scary. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all for another really great evening. I will be sending this recording around because some people couldn't come. So we will talk. I mean, you'll see the recording if you want to watch it again. Okay?
Can we possibly share it with friends that didn't make it to this?
Absolutely. You're going to get it. Oh. I'll put it in the Facebook group, but I'm also going to email it to the group of readers.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
all right,
Julia.
Say good night, everybody.
Have a great weekend, Julia. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye. Love you, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Everybody. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for being there.
All right.
Stay safe.
Yes.
Bye, Sandy.
Yes.
Everybody stay safe. Yeah.
Stay safe and well, and happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, and all the other holidays that may be.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, happy
Taylor Swift album day. Happy Honda days. We're kind of more of a Toyota fan family, though. All right.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Night, night.